I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. And I have to be honest, this one feels a little bit different. What started as an idea about how to create healthier and more sustainable communities in 2005 has really crystallized into something that I think we can say has truly been transformative. In 2009, when Mayor Jackson launched the Sustainable Cleveland 2019 initiative, the idea of sustainability was not nearly as universal as it is today. Cleveland as a community truly stepped forward to establish itself as a leader in the emerging effort to use climate action in a manner to meaningfully impact the quality of life of our residents and the overall health and vitality of our environment, our neighborhoods, and our economy. For the past 13 years, we've come together at these annual summits to develop a set of shared community priorities for climate action in Cleveland, to celebrate the progress that we've made toward advancing these priorities, to discuss the emerging trends that allow us to capitalize on knowledge that we learn from other places, and to develop strategies that overcome any challenges that we face, and we do it together. Through this process, we have done so much that we should be proud of. Now, this is usually the portion of the summit where we provide an update on what's happened during the past year. We talk about projects that we've been working on. We show you a lot of graphs and charts, and we talk about tangible progress that we've made over the past 365 days. And I'll certainly do some of that. But since this is the last summit during the Jackson administration, I wanted to deviate a little bit from that and take a moment to really reflect on where we started, how we got to where we are today, and to highlight not just the work of the city, but also all of the partners who, through a combination of commitment and collaboration, have left this city a better place. In 2009, the community came together for the first Sustainable Cleveland Summit to start the process of building an economic engine to empower a green city on a blue lake. More than 700 people came together to develop a shared vision of what Cleveland could be in 2019 if we took intentional and focused climate action. If we were in person, I'd ask those of you who were in attendance to stand at that first summit. But since we're virtual, maybe just drop a note in the chat or drop a mention in the chat. We'd love to know who you are and who's been with us the whole time. Those 700 pioneers envisioned a Cleveland where, among other things, we've eradicated poverty. We're a city that's totally self-sufficient on renewable energy. Our businesses are committed to sustainable practices. We're a healthier community. Residents are highly educated and active in the green economy. We buy more things locally. Our remediation efforts for our lake and our river have been recognized nationally and internationally. And perhaps most importantly, we've become a community of green citizens with a city that is a sustainable environment for all. Now, this was an audacious and an aggressive and unprecedented thing for a community to try to do. As we set about tackling how we could achieve this bold vision, these things fundamentally shaped the scope of Sustainable Cleveland's work. We came together at these summits and beyond, and we heard from thought leaders in the sustainability space. We shared ideas on how we could collaboratively move Cleveland forward. We held each other accountable to our commitments, and we celebrated our progress on getting to where we want and need to be. We organized this work by focusing on a specific topic every year. 2011 was the year of energy efficiency. 2012 was the year of local foods. In 2013, we celebrated and focused on advanced and renewable energy resources. 2014 was the year of zero waste. 2015 was one of my personal favorites, the year of clean water. 2016 focused on sustainable transportation. 2017 looked at creating vibrant green spaces for residents. 2018 started to pull it all together by focusing on vital neighborhoods. In 2019, we closed out the initial 10 years by focusing on the most important asset and responsibility that we all have, our people. Now, pulling all of this together and maintaining the momentum that we developed through Sustainable Cleveland was a feat in and of itself. But I think the more impressive part was the way that we really have come together collectively and been able to directly and tangibly improve the quality of life for the people who live and work in the city of Cleveland. These improvements started with our climate action plan. Together, we developed our first climate action plan in 2013 and centered it around the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80% over a 2010 baseline by 2050. We updated our climate action plan in 2018 through a community-focused process that brought together not just the 900 members of the Climate Action Advisory Committee, but more than 300 residents who participated in community meetings spread across the city. Through this process, we tried to capture the diversity that makes the city so strong and so resilient. We use this engagement process to update the climate action plan, maintaining the focus on emissions, but also broadening it to look at the additional benefits of climate action beyond emissions and create an explicit linkage to focus on how we can use climate action to address inequity, disparity, and institutionalized racism in our community. The 2018 update, which was recognized by the American Planning Association with its award in excellence and sustainability, has driven the action that our office and this broader community has taken and has led to real progress in the areas that we need to address. And it's also helped us embed equity into all of our climate actions, helping Cleveland become a leader in this space and making a meaningful difference for our residents and businesses. So what does this progress look like? In terms of energy efficiency, during the Sustainable Cleveland 2019 initiative, over 6,000 residential units met the city's green building standards. And countless other organizations such as COSY, CHN, and many more have provided vital resources to make homes and businesses more efficient and more comfortable. In terms of local food, multiple organizations stepped up to help solve critical issues around access to healthy foods. For more than 10 years, Rid-All Green Partnership, FAIR, Green City Growers, and a host of others have been doing amazing work supporting and developing our local food economy. Cleveland has truly become a home to an amazing collection of urban farms, which are helping residents in so many different ways. We have seen significant increases in the amount of renewable energy coming into our community. Since 2009, we've seen the percentage of electricity generated from renewable sources increase from 3% to 13%. This is due to a number of factors, including the adoption of CPP's Advanced Energy Portfolio Standard, which committed to having 25% of CPP's power sourced from renewable sources by 2025, and the incorporation of 100% clean energy into the Community Choice Aggregation Program. It also was spurred along by the growth of the distributed renewable installations like this small solar array, which grew from 9 in 2010 to nearly 200 today. Our waste efforts have benefited from wonderful partners as well, such as Rust Belt Riders, who have diverted more than 4 million pounds of food waste, and organizations such as Stone Soup and the Hunger Network, who have used food rescue programs to help address the joint challenges of waste diversion and food insecurity. And we can also say confidently that our water resources are healthier today. For example, through the hard work of so many people and organizations, including the Cuyahoga AOC and the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, we have removed beneficial use impairments from the Cuyahoga River and have captured the vital restoration and remediation work that is ongoing as we work to ultimately delist the Cuyahoga River as an area of concern. Our water utilities, Cleveland Water and the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, have also stepped up to be strong environmental stewards of our precious water assets, both the Cuyahoga River and Lake Erie. In addition to this vital environmental stewardship, they have developed programs that help residents identify and repair water leaks, reduce combined sewer overflows, and address water equity, providing direct benefit and assistance to our residents who are most in need. Our transportation systems have become more sustainable. We have become a more pedestrian and bike-friendly city thanks to the investments by so many organizations in our bike infrastructure and trail systems. Perhaps most notably, we've recently seen the completion of the towpath trail through Tremont and down to Canal Basin Park. A project this complex could not have been done without the involvement of so many important partners, including the Canalway Partners, the Cleveland Metro Parks, Cuyahoga County, the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, NOACA, ODOT, the Cleveland City Planning Commission, and the Mayor's Office of Capital Projects. We have also made significant progress on ensuring our residents can access the green spaces that provide so many health, social, and environmental benefits. We continue to move toward providing 100% of our residents access to a park within a 10-minute walk. Currently, according to the Trust for Public Land, 83% of Clevelanders are within a 10-minute walk of a park. This far exceeds the national average of 55%, and we've moved all the way up to 24th in their national park score ranking. So we should be proud of the progress we've made there. Additionally, we've seen over 40 organizations come together through the Cleveland Tree Coalition to aggressively work toward the restoration of Cleveland's tree canopy to 30% by 2040. These efforts are led by a strong executive committee, which includes partners such as the Western Reserve Land Conservancy, Holden Forest and Gardens, Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, Cuyahoga County, Environmental Health Watch, the Sewer District, the Metro Parks, and has led to the development of a Cleveland Tree Plan, which was updated in 2020. While we've not as of yet reversed the trend, we have slowed the rate of loss and have reestablished trees as a critical part of our urban fabric and a vital community asset. But outside of the specific policy areas, I think we have all created lasting change in our city by ingraining sustainability into our organizations. At the neighborhood level, we have seen community development corporations embed climate action into their strategic investment initiative planning, and others, such as Slavic Village and Metro West, have adopted the eco-districts model for neighborhoods. Neighborhood Connections, which has been around longer than Sustainable Cleveland, has evolved into a great partner in our efforts. Through their hard work across all of the things that they do, they've funded over 3,000 projects, distributing over $8 million of grants, many of them sustainability related and all of them community focused. This includes the Cleveland Climate Action Fund, which since its initial launch has supported 70 resident-led neighborhood-based projects with funding exceeding $170,000. And more directly from our Sustainable Cleveland Summits, we've seen several working groups graduate to become nonprofits delivering important resources to people and businesses, including, among others, Drink Local, Drink Tap, which helps people here and around the globe with water access issues, the Cleveland 2030 District, which helps commercial properties improve the energy and water efficiency, Upcycle Part Shop, which reuses materials to create beautiful art, educate people, and improve the condition of our neighborhoods, and the Cleveland Water Alliance, which is leveraging water technology to drive economic development and spark innovation across our community. All of this work has continued in the 2 years since we wrapped up the Sustainable Cleveland 2019 initiative with the Cuyahoga 50 celebration. And what an event and a party that was. As we celebrated the culmination of Sustainable Cleveland 2019, over 50,000 people participated in more than 25 events spread across the community. This event put us in the national spotlight, demonstrating that Cleveland was a national leader in urban environmental remediation and showing that Sustainable Cleveland 2019 could be a model for how other cities can engage their community in sustainability and climate action. And this was certainly a tough act to follow, and it provided a perfect moment to contemplate the future of Sustainable Cleveland. When I took this job, this was one of the first conversations that I had with Mayor Jackson. To be clear, it was not a conversation about if Sustainable Cleveland should continue, but rather how it should continue. As we looked to the future, we talked about how to continue on the journey we needed. We needed to develop another signpost, another thing to aim for as we moved along our journey towards becoming a more sustainable community. So much of the initial 10-year initiative was focused on the 50th anniversary of the last Cuyahoga River fire, that implementing those grand visions that we've outlined over the past few minutes, we really felt it was important to set another aggressive goal. At last year's summit, we outlined our goal of becoming a LEED Platinum city. Now, we liked LEED for several reasons. First, it's a holistic look at how we're doing. It blends information specifically from city operations, but it also brings in data from a broader community perspective. Additionally, it has a critical focus on improving quality of life. We get points for having the right policies in place and increasing programmatic efficiency, and those things are important. But at the end of the process, if we aren't making things better for the people we serve, we're not going to get to that platinum certification where we want to be. And lastly, LEED for Cities lines up with a lot of our climate action plan. So we really took a hard look at the priorities that this community came together in 2018 and outlined to make sure that we were in alignment with that in our LEED for Cities process. Over the past year, we've worked diligently with the support of too many partners to name them all, including a lot of you who are in this room and on this call right now, to pull together all of the information that we needed to support this important effort. This past summer, we completed and submitted our application to the USGBC in support of our LEED for Cities application. And earlier this month, we received the official results, and today we can proudly announce that Cleveland is a LEED Silver certified city. Now, this is a significant step on our way to becoming a LEED Platinum city. With 57 total points, we were just a little bit short of that gold certification. But more importantly, outside of the certification, this is another validation and demonstration that all of the hard work that everyone in this virtual room has done to make Cleveland more sustainable, more equitable, and more resilient is paying dividends. Without all of that work and without each and every one of you in this room, we would not have gotten to where we are today. And without the continued support of each and every one of you on this call, we won't get to where we want to be. Now, I assure you, as we kind of think about what this path forward looks like, even through the difficulty of COVID-19 over the past year, the Office of Sustainability has been hard at work moving our city forward on these priorities. Earlier this year, we completed and released our 100% renewable electricity demand strategy. This report, entitled Cleveland's Clean and Equitable Energy Future, is another example of the collaborative effort that we've used to be successful throughout the duration of Sustainable Cleveland. In this case, we utilized funding from Partners for Places, the Cleveland Foundation, the Gunn Foundation, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland. And we had a great team helping to guide and shape the project, including Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, Black Environmental Leaders, Cray Consulting, CHN Housing Partners, and Organic Connects. We contacted with GreenLink Analytics, a national leader on carbon footprint accounting and utility resource planning, and also someone who's spent a lot of time thinking about the environmental and social impact that our work can have. They conducted the quantitative modeling and really pulled the report together. As we started the work, like we do with all of our projects, we obviously wanted to focus on the environmental and economic benefits that the transition could support. But we also wanted to make sure that we were using this as an opportunity to address equity in the energy space. Nationally, we generally see electric and gas account for about 3.6% of household expenses. In Cleveland, it's much higher, about 6.5% on average. And we see significant percentages of our population facing high energy burden or even severe energy burden, which you kind of see in those red and yellow colors spread throughout our community. So equity, like in all things, had to be at the forefront of our planning process. Through this work, we learned some valuable lessons. First, and I don't think that this is particularly shocking, we learned that our ability to achieve what we want to do is severely constrained by state policy. In other words, for us to get to where we want to be in terms of clean energy without a different approach at the state level, we're going to be overly dependent upon renewable energy credits, which from our perspective is not the optimal equity-based strategy. Now, having said that, even within these constraints, the transition to 100% clean energy can have a significant positive impact on the key priorities that we've built into our planning process, which include promoting improved energy equity by cutting energy burden in half, leveraging this as an opportunity to bring in up to 5,000 new jobs and create more than $1.5 billion of new income for residents, and improving human and neighborhood health with nearly $250 million of avoided health incidents. Thirdly, we learned that we've made significant progress on this goal, but now we've been able to develop a fairly robust policy toolkit that we can draw from as we look to move this important priority forward. Another area we saw major activity in 2021 was around waste management. And this part of the conversation has to start with recycling. Like many cities around the world, our recycling program was hit hard by changes in the global market. In April of 2020, we temporarily suspended curbside recycling. And since that point, the Office of Sustainability has been working with the Department of Public Works and the Division of Waste Collection as they reevaluate the entirety of the waste management process. After careful consideration of some recommendations provided by GT Environmental, who is our external expert on all things waste, we're moving forward with a bi-weekly opt-in curbside recycling program. We are nearing the end of the opt-in period for the initial deployment, and we have over 16,000 households that have signed up for the program. There's still a little bit of time for individuals to get in the initial deployment. The final day to opt in to get into the first batch is this Friday. In addition, we've brought on a new recycling coordinator, Ren Brumfeld, who I think many of you may know. His job is to provide the communication and education support that we know is so critical to the long-term success of this effort. We are currently evaluating the bids for a sorting and processing contractor and remain on schedule to have this important program back up and running before the end of the year. But we know that long-term, we are not going to recycle our way out of our waste management challenges. So the city, in conjunction with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, Neighborhood Connections, and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, have combined in a grant application with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation entitled Circular Cleveland: Advancing Health, Equity, and Climate in the Great Lakes. If you're not familiar with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, they're a global thought leader on circular economy solutions. After a pretty intensive evaluation process with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Cleveland was one of 6 cities that were selected to receive this grant. In total, we were awarded a little under $500,000 out of an available $3 million to launch our efforts. We're looking at a 30-month project that's divided into 2 phases. It includes funding for a roadmap and development of a plan for what we need to do. But what we really like about this grant is that it includes a significant portion of funds for the implementation, including $60,000 to launch a composting program at the West Side Market, $75,000 for neighborhood-level community-led projects, and $100,000 of small business loans. As we've been working and communicating with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation since receiving the grant, there are several things that they've said they really liked about our application. And chief among these was our intentional focus on equity and how we can align the environmental and economic benefits of what we're doing through the Circular Cleveland Initiative to our vulnerable populations. Over the past year, we've been hard at work on this grant. The roadmap development process is well underway, and many of you on this call may have been one of the over 100 participants that have engaged through our stakeholder engagement process so far. Additionally, we've already started to move implementation funding to residents. Through Neighborhood Connections, we've already issued the first round of neighborhood grants. In total, 14 projects have been awarded right around $40,000 to initiate or expand circular activity-based projects that they've got going in their communities. And these grants support some wonderful resident-led neighborhood-level initiatives that are putting sustainable action into practice in a very meaningful and impactful way. Additionally, we now have 10 paid Circular Cleveland ambassadors working as liaisons between our project and residents in 12 city neighborhoods. The roadmap will be complete in early 2022, and we're on schedule to complete this project that we believe will make Cleveland more circular, more environmentally sustainable, allow us to shape healthier communities and neighborhoods, and perhaps most importantly, if we do it right, create the economic opportunity and wealth for residents that they so vitally need. We have also been hard at work on developing and maintaining vibrant green spaces. Among the many lessons reinforced during the COVID-19 pandemic is just how important access to quality, safe green spaces is for residents. We are working aggressively to develop better park spaces with many partners, including the Trust for Public Land, the Mayor's Office of Capital Projects, City Planning, and the Department of Public Works. Over the past year, we secured nearly $700,000 of grant funding from the National Park Service to support the development of a new Clark Park on the city's west side. Additionally, we are currently in the process of developing new strategies to shift resident engagement earlier into the park design process to ensure that we are building community assets that are aligned with community needs. Perhaps no other green space efforts have received as much attention recently as our tree planting. As I mentioned earlier, restoring our tree canopy to 30% is one of our critical goals, and in the past year, we've been able to expand our planting activity significantly. Using the additional $1 million per year that Mayor Jackson committed in 2019, we were able to increase the number of trees planted by urban forestry in 2020 to nearly 2,000. This represents a 300% increase over the previous 5-year average, and this increased planting should carry over into 2021 and 2022 when we hit our new steady state of operations, planting at about 3,000 new trees per year. But we also have to recognize that trees can solve so many issues for residents. So we're also working to ensure that our tree planting is done in as equitable of a way as possible. This year, we developed a targeting model for tree planting that recognizes that the marginal value of a tree is different based on where you put it. Our new tree planting model accounts for income inequality, racial equity, other demographic factors such as age, social determinants of health, and proximity to environmental risk to ensure that the trees that we plant can do the most good for our residents. This model will be used to support planting beginning in fall of 2022, and we will make it publicly available so that other organizations that are committed to restoring our tree canopy can follow this approach as well if they so choose. Electrifying our city fleet has also been a big priority. In 2021, we completed an analysis in the Office of Sustainability and developed an approach that will allow the city to transition its light duty and passenger fleet to be 100% electric vehicles by 2035. To support this effort, we are nearing the completion of an order that will add approximately 40 more electric vehicles into the city's fleet. And we are also focusing on adding charging infrastructure to support our fleet transition and develop a public-facing network to support the growth in EV penetration. Through partnerships with NOACA, we're adding 4 public charging stations at the West Side Market, the new Ward 1 Rec Center, Hopkins Airport, and Willard Garage to support this very important effort. But we know that we still have so much work to do. Every day, we're presented with more and more tangible evidence that climate change is real, it is here, and it poses an existential threat to us all. We are constantly exposed to news stories about extreme heat across the nation and world, more intense and severe storm systems, and we see important water systems that millions of people rely on around the world drying up. And while we may not see these extreme effects locally, we are not immune from the damage they bring. With all of the success of the past 12 years and all that we have done in the past 12 months, we know that there is still a lot of work that has to be done here locally. And this is really what the next 2 days is all about. And this has to start with continuing to find ways to drive emissions lower in our city. We have an aggressive goal to reduce emissions by 80% by 2050, and we've made progress. But with an approximate 9% reduction, we are not where we want to be. Additionally, we learned through the Lead for Cities process that our greenhouse gas emissions per capita lag behind many other places. And of all of the takeaways from our 100% clean energy report, we know that to truly change this, we will have to take an all-hands-on-deck approach to clean energy. We need to continue to build on the progress that we've made at the utility scale and look at other opportunities to get more clean energy generated for Clevelanders. This means looking at distributed generation options, including residential on-site solar and community solar, which can provide so many immediate and long-term benefits for residents. It also means getting creative about how we look at larger scale generation projects. At the city level, we have an ordinance in front of City Council to install solar PV installations on our own city facilities. We're also starting our due diligence on how to best utilize the city's collective purchasing power to identify midterm and longer-term renewable development options to create local additionality in terms of clean energy. Later today, we have a panel that's going to touch on all 3 of these aspects. If you're interested, I would highly encourage you to come listen in on that because this is a critical portion of where we need to focus our attention moving forward. Additionally, our clean energy report was very clear that Cleveland, due to our local housing stock and a host of other factors, can achieve significant energy efficiency gains. We are working in conjunction with other cities across Ohio on a method to identify properties where efficiency is an issue and to better target policy interventions that we believe can make a real difference for residents. But this is only one piece in a larger set of things that we as a community need to do. Tomorrow, we have a group and a panel set to discuss just how we can put some of these important energy efficiency practices into motion moving forward into next year. We also need to continue working on ways to improve the way we create and manage waste. And this is what our Circular Cleveland initiative is really designed to do. As I mentioned earlier, we've already made progress on this important initiative, but we have to continue moving this forward. Please do not try to read this too hard. I know this is a really small chart to be on a screen, but this is an early phase of our materials flow analysis. This is essentially the accounting of what comes into Cleveland and what goes out in various forms of waste. This is the basis of our road mapping process and is already helping us identify potential focus areas for long-term circular strategies that can work in Cleveland and will help us move our economy forward in a more sustainable way. We have 2 sessions later in the summit that will get into this in much more detail if you want to learn more about the Circular Cleveland Initiative and have your voice heard in that important and critical process. We also need to dive into our LEED for City certification report and figure out how we can move together to become a LEED Platinum city. Again, don't try to read the slide in too much detail, but this is the LEED for Cities scorecard, which we'll go over in more detail later in the summit. As I mentioned earlier, being a LEED Silver certified city is a great start and something we should be tremendously proud of. But we need to develop an expanded approach as we think about how to move forward towards becoming a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable city, and determine what we need to do to prioritize and focus on in the next certification cycle. We need to begin to think about how to embed this important approach in our operations, in our reporting, and perhaps most importantly, into the next climate action plan update that will be needed by 2023. Over the next 2 days, we have multiple sessions to help us do just this. First, we'll hear from representatives of the USGBC who will walk through our LEED for Cities application, go through the criteria, and talk about where we did well and candidly where we need to do some work. Then we'll hear from some organizations that are advancing innovative approaches in those areas where we fell a little bit short and talk through some ways that as a community we can collectively move forward and do better in those areas. Additionally, we're finalizing changes to the Sustainable Cleveland dashboard to make it more relevant to our audience, more aligned with LEED for Cities and some of our other reporting priorities, and also to be an easier tool for you all to hold us accountable to our commitments. These 3 breakout sessions are where we really want to hear from you. This is your chance to help us, like you have done so many times before, establish the priorities that we should pursue together and develop a better public-facing approach to track our progress. And there is so much more great stuff to learn and discuss during the rest of the summit. We have sessions on water quality, trees, the intersection of climate action and racism as a public health issue, electric vehicles, sustainable transportation, and so much more. As I wrap up, I want to start with some thank yous. And first, as we close out the Jackson administration, I want to thank Mayor Jackson for launching this initiative back in 2009 and remaining committed to it for the duration. The work that we have done has not always been easy, but he has always supported this work and has been so committed to these vital programs that we're providing to residents and businesses. I also want to thank my predecessors in this role, Andrew, Janita, and Matt, without whom much of the success and the momentum that I outlined today would not have been possible. They've been great and very big shoes to follow, and I'm happy to have been able to do that. But they didn't do it alone. And so I want to thank all of the people over the years who have worked in the Office of Sustainability, all the way back to its initial creation back in 2005. In particular, I want to thank the 7 people who are on staff today, Kristen, Anand, Kathy, Felina, Libby, Patty, and Brittany, as well as Deepa and Elza, who spent a big chunk of the last year with us before transitioning to other opportunities. All of the work of the past year that I highlighted a few minutes ago was the result of this team of dedicated professionals who are so committed to improving the quality of life through our residents through environmentally conscious and sustainable action. And lastly, but most importantly, I want to thank all of you. Whether this is your first summit or whether you've been with us since the beginning, none of the progress that we've made as a community would have happened without you and the organizations that you represent making a commitment to promote sustainability in your organizations, in your community, and in your home. Since launching these summits, we've had over 6,000 people come together to figure out how we can use climate action to make Cleveland a better place. Together, we have accomplished so much that we should be proud of. And as we turn our attention to the challenges that we must face in the future, please remember that it's going to take all of us to overcome them. Because of everything we have accomplished so far, we have done it together. And for everything that we still have to do, it will only work and succeed if we keep doing it together. Thank you.
Jason, I want to thank you for that awesome report. We've been getting some amazing comments in our chat box, just some really positive stuff. And for those of you that have been with us on our summit journeys, this is for me what it's all about, is this positive energy and all of us kind of working collectively towards this. So it's so great to see so many of you here. Jason, I want to ask a couple of questions that are coming from the audience. One of the ones that we received was, what specific incentives can Cleveland provide to boost ridership on the RTA?
Specific incentive for boosting ridership on RTA. I think we've got to really think about how we engage more on public transportation. So as we look at the long-term strategies and how we start to think more about sustainable transportation systems, RTA has to play a big role in that. They've done some great work recently, kind of configuring kind of the model of how they are looking to provide service to residents and realigning some of the routes and those sorts of things. So let's think a little bit about how we can do more as a community, both from an incentive structure, but also from a transit design and development structure. I think one of the key things we're looking at as a city is focusing on things like transit-oriented design, where we're really trying to concentrate pockets of cluster. And our City Planning Commission Director Collier is a big proponent of this, and the administration generally is a big proponent of transit-oriented design. And when we look at things like what we saw in our Lead for Cities application, you're going to hear me refer back to that in a lot of answers. We kept talking about this idea of complete and compact centers, and they wanted us to be able to demonstrate and document that. And that's one of those areas where we've got to have some conversation about how do we build those out, because that's not a credit that we were able to secure. So I think for us as a city, I think what we have to do is have to start focusing at the very base level of how do we look and incentivize development that concentrates itself around transit-oriented design. And I know that our planning department and our folks in community development and economic development are working very aggressively to do just that. If there are other questions and you want to drop them in the chat, I'm more than happy to answer them. A good point made by my friend, Chief Valerie McCall, about really back to the transit issue, about really kind of understanding and starting a conversation with the federal government and the state government about support for public transportation. Yeah, we absolutely need to figure out how we can do that and how we can move and advance those things forward.
I will ask a couple quick questions. The first one, are there existing resources to train people to help Cleveland transition to an economy driven by renewable energy, such as Tri-Cs or vocational schools? As a faculty member at CWRU, I am interested in prospects of starting something like a Just Transitions Institute.
So I think if I heard correctly, the question was about kind of how do we start to plan for clean energy transitions with an eye on kind of equity and creating some of those just transitions. And yeah, that's a critical portion of it. If we come back and we spent a lot of time as we developed our clean energy plan, the clean and equitable energy future, focusing just on that issue around workforce development and knowing that the economic potential of the transition to clean energy is really important and is, if we're talking about potentially creating up to 5,000 jobs and $1.5 billion of new income, that's really, really great. And that's good for the region. But if we continue to think about workforce development the way that we've always thought about workforce development, we're going to lose an opportunity to really make this an equitable process. So how do we start to engage differently around workforce development in a way that lets us focus on kind of those key and critical priorities about what we're seeing from a workforce and equity standpoint? So how do we start to get more residents into these programs? How do we start to construct these training mechanisms and lining up from a contracting standpoint to get residents in there? We have to continue to do that because we can't use an opportunity to create that much economic growth and economic opportunity. We can't let that go by without really using it as an opportunity to serve our residents who are most vulnerable and most in need, because we know that every action we take has a cost and benefit, right? What we have to do is really focus on making sure that the costs aren't disproportionately borne on any one population group, and that the benefits are available to everyone. So it's a critically important piece of the pie that we've spent a lot of time thinking about, and we'll have to continue to wrestle with as we make this transition. So I see some questions popping up in here. Let me scroll back through. I see Matt's question. Oh, Michael Malampi asked, does Cleveland compost yard waste? If not, are there plans to? So right now, we do not have composting for residential yard waste, Michael. One of the things that we've looked at doing through this new kind of waste reevaluation was creating 6 super center drop-off locations. And these locations will be spread throughout the city. And one of those mechanisms that will allow us to do will become a drop-off location potentially for yard waste, so we can start to think about that. Now, we're going to take a look in the interim at that composting program at the West Side Market. And you can imagine the amount of organic waste that comes through there. And the trick for us is how do we take that organic waste and that compost that we can generate through that program and put it back into productive use in our operations? So how do we use it to kind of supplement soil so that we can improve outcomes for trees? How do we supplement it so we can improve some of these things? So I think we're probably a little bit early to say, yes, we're going to have a yard waste composting program, but those super center drop-off locations are going to be the critical first step in that. And one of the ways that I think taking this reset and rebuild approach on the waste collection operations, and that's not just the recycling program, that's looking at bulk collection and regular trash collection as well, is it's going to give us a pathway to start to look at expanded services. And at some point in the future, we're going to have a conversation about curbside yard waste collection. That's probably not in the next year or the next 2 years, but we've got to start to think and have that discussion now. But getting those super centers set up will be a critical piece of that process. Abdullah Jordan asked about how do we embed education and make that a factor as we build a sustainable city. I think what we've got to do as a city and a community is begin to think about really how do we start to make that a critical component of all of the different projects that we're implementing. So it can't be something that we should focus on kind of in isolation. We've got to make it just kind of that portion of regular business of operation. So let me give you an example of that. So recycling, I'll come back to recycling. One of the challenges and the difficulties that we had with recycling was getting that communication and that direct contact out to residents, and really kind of identifying how we can do that. When we had this citywide approach, the way that the data was initially collected, we didn't have a way to go back to residents and kind of communicate. So we had to take this kind of scattered approach to communications and engagement and education. So by scaling the program back and getting that out, we've collected direct contact information. So now we can go back with targeted messages to individuals. So we can start that discussion around what we're seeing at the transfer station, what we're hearing from the processor, what we're seeing as we do route audits, as we kind of look at these things. Where are we seeing challenges? What materials are we seeing? How is the market changing? What should we be focused on? We'll have a direct communication mechanism to get that done. And we have to build that into every project and every program as we think about it. The other part of it, I think, starts with kind of getting more engagement up front. So stepping back and not just coming back to individuals and saying, here, we've developed this thing, react to this, but collecting that feedback in a meaningful way and kind of creating a sense of co-production as we design these things. A great example of this is some of the work that we're doing with Trust for Public Land and capital projects and city planning and public works around community engagement in this Clark Park that I mentioned. So we're trying to collect that resident input up front. Instead of giving them kind of a schematic park design and say, tell us what you think of what we wrote down, saying, what do you need for this park to serve your community needs? And then designing to that information. So we've got to attack it at the front end from an engagement standpoint, and then it's got to be persistent, baked in continual communication and education if we're going to be successful on these issues. I hope that answered your question. Abdullah, let me scan through. Claire asked, what's the status of the Lake Erie Wind project? Oh goodness, I can see these on the screen now. That's fantastic. So Claire asked about the status of the Lake Erie Wind project. It is still kind of in a holding pattern. It's out there. We're still kind of trying to understand what it looks like and what it will be moving forward. I would suspect we'll have a better answer to that in the very near term. But right now it's kind of in a holding pattern a little bit. I wish I had a better answer for you than that, but that's kind of where we are. Karen, I see, is a recent transplant from Arlington. Welcome, Karen. Thanks for joining us today. Erwin Lowenstein, Chief, in your view, what would be the top policy priority you'd like to see the administration or council take on to foster greater sustainability? I think we've got to be honest with ourselves. It's got to be around emissions. And that's just generally, we have to really be honest with ourselves about emissions. We've set this goal of reducing emissions 80% by 2050 over a 2010 baseline. And we've started to make progress, and we're seeing that come down. And most importantly, we're seeing the decoupling of emissions and economic activity. So we've got to build on that. I think we're not moving as quickly as we can. And I think as we think about emissions in our Cleveland context, and I really encourage you, if you're interested in what we're doing around emissions and energy in particular, to come to the session this afternoon. We have to talk about energy use when we talk about our emissions because of the shape and the profile of emissions in our region. Like energy use just makes up a big piece of that pie. So I think we've got to continue to be creative. And this is spurred partly by just the general necessity, but also some of the restrictions that we feel and some of the limitations that have been placed on some of this via the state, some of the state actions that we've seen over the past few years. So we'll talk about this in more detail this afternoon, but I think continuing to really drive the energy transition is critically important as we look to this. So Erin said she signed up for recycling but have not received any direct communication. You should be receiving an email very, very soon. I would suspect as we kind of close down the enrollment opt-in period on Friday, and it's not going to close. Like you'll still be able to opt in. You just might not be in the first batch. You may not get added to the recycling program until we reroute in early 2022. You should be receiving an email probably in the next week or less outlining what to expect and where we are and getting that confirmation, Erin. So thank you for signing up. And then Christina's question I see has popped up in front of me. If you had to think of what your highest hope would be for next year's summit, what would it be? Wow, is that a really, really good question? Man, that is a really tough question. What would my highest hope be for next year's summit? That we're all back in person, maybe. I think the virtual summits the last 2 years have been great. But I miss seeing everybody in person, and I miss the interaction we get to have of sitting around these tables and kind of really engaging directly with one another to start to implement solutions. I think that's it for me. I think I'd love to see us all back together as a healthy community, as a safe community, really focused on starting to drive some of this important change moving forward. Doreen says, any resident or business with questions on waste reduction? Yes, Doreen, great note. The Cuyahoga County Solid Waste District has been a wonderful, wonderful partner. As we've looked to restart our recycling program, are very knowledgeable about this. They're a great resource for all things waste and recycling. So please check them out.